Hey, good morning, everybody. You know, I was thinking about this for a while, and this is what always gets me about college football, and I like college football, don't get me wrong, I really do. I like watching it every year. It's very unique because well, one, the NFL is great and all. There's no doubt about it. There's nothing going to ever replace the NFL. Nothing. I mean, nothing's ever going to top it. But college football, always seems to be the sport. Always seems to be the version of football that a lot of people like to watch. Because not just due to the rankings, not just due to the fact that, despite how people feel about it, you got a variety of bowl games out there teams can go to at the end of the year. But the one thing they like about it is the fact that you always have an upset or two or 10, if you will, in the works during the season. Now, speaking of upsets, usually what that means sometimes is when a smaller school upsets a bigger school. Now, we've seen over the past few years that could happen. We saw about a few years ago Appalachian State, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, Appalachian State upset Michigan in Michigan's own backyard. And Appalachian State's an FSS school, Football Championship Series school. Well, Michigan is an FBS school, Football Bowl Series school. Or football BCS school, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, the one thing that's always intrigued me about it is the first 2, maybe 3 weeks of the season. And that's when you have these smaller FCS schools, if you will, show up and face these teams. Now, like I said, there's always a chance you could have an upset. In fact, I was looking at the scoreboard for last night in the Big 12, and Kansas State won by 3 over Eastern Kentucky. So it kind of tells you that some of these football championship series schools, or FCS schools, or whatever you want to call them, are determined to make a name for themselves and determined to prove a point that they are just as good and capable of competing with the big boys, if you will, of college football, as anyone out there. But to me, the one thing I just don't get sometimes is, why should they even put themselves through this? Why should they even have to go and prove to themselves, hey, we could compete on that same level? Well, even though we'll probably lose, maybe by a few points, maybe we'll get annihilated. Why should you do that? Here's the thing that I look at. If you're gonna rank in a preseason AP, USA Today, Sporting News, Sports Illustrated News poll, whatever you want to call it, if you're gonna rank someone really high, if you're gonna rank, to me, this is what I would do. If you got the top 10 teams ranked high, and you have a lot of faith that these are going to be the top 10 teams that are going to make it all the way, and that most of them are going to get to a BCS game, or at least to the national championship, here's what I would do, honestly. Here's what I would do. If I know that these are the top 10 teams that I feel could get to the BCS, here's what I would do. All honest truth. All honest to God truth. I would have them honestly be tested right off the bat. Don't bring in the FCS schools. Don't bring in the smaller FBS schools. Bring in big time schools. Bring in schools that will really give them a run for their money. Really have to make them prove, hey, we're just as good as anybody. In fact, they had 2 games last night. in my opinion, that kind of prove that. Boise State and Georgia, Oregon and LSU. Now I think Boise beat Georgia. I'm pretty sure of it. I'm pretty sure of it. I'm checking my Sporting News app right now. But again, I'm pretty sure of it. I'm not really sure. But again, this is what you need to do. You need to take an example off of that and say, you know what, that's what we need to do. And it looks like Oregon is starting off with a loss this year. They lost by 13 to LSU. That kind of tells you that's, now you see, even though they lost by 13, it at least starts to prove to the world, are they tough enough to continue? Can they get to a BCS now? Can they make a repeat? See what I'm saying? And you're going to probably have them, probably in the next week or two, to fall behind Boise State. So what does that tell you? That tells you that this is how it should be done. You should have them, you should have the 10, in my opinion, the top 10 teams ranked go against high-profile teams of bigger conferences like the ACC, like the SEC, like the Big 10, like the Big 12, or should I say the Big 11. And then, well, both are Big 11. What am I talking about? Actually, the new Big 11, formerly the Big 10, and the new Big 10, formerly the Big 12. You know, have them go against teams from those conferences. Go against teams from the Pac-12 if you want to. Do that, because you know what? You'll at least see if maybe they are ready to take that next step. If they are ready to take it to that next level, if they are worthy of all the hype behind them. That's what I would do. I would take your top 10 teams ranked in your top 25, doesn't matter which top 25 it is, and have them go against high-profile teams from high-profile conferences. Now, I'm not saying that teams from the WAC, I'm not saying that teams from the independents, if you will, and I'm not saying teams from the MAC or the big you know, I'm not saying any of that. I'm not trying to say that, you know, teams from the MAC, the WAC, the independents, the Mountain West, you know, the Sun Belt. You know, I'm not trying to say those teams aren't capable of pulling upsets or giving close games. They are. And the same could be said for the teams from the football championship series side of deals. Like the Appalachian States, like the Eastern Kentuckys, like the McNeese States, like the North Carolina Centrals. I'm not trying to say, you know, they're not capable of pulling upsets. They are. And I'm not saying they're not capable of giving close games. They are. But here's, if you want to look at it from a percentage-wise, here's what you got. The smaller conferences of the FBS combined with the teams of the FCS, this is what you got. With those two combined, you have a 5% chance you could have upsets, 10% chance you could have very close games, and 85% of complete annihilation. Let me rephrase that. 5% chance of an upset, which does happen occasions, but a 5% chance, 10% chance of an extremely close game, and 85% chance of complete annihilation. Now you may argue with that and say, oh, that's a whacked out percentage wise, this is the way I look at it. And you have the right to do that. You have the right to say that. But I'm just saying that, to me, is how I look at it. And I can understand and respect the fact that the reason some of these smaller FCS schools and even some of the smaller FBS schools show up and show up and visit or even host these bigger schools, not just for the fact that they want to prove themselves and eventually possibly do or be part of that 5% equation of upsetting them, but it's also because of the money. They want the moolah, which isn't a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. But what I'm saying, folks, is this. I can understand and respect that, but the way I look at it, you should at least take your top 10 teams out of your top 25, doesn't matter what poll they're in, and have them start off right off the bat with teams from high-profile conferences. With conferences that are legitimately BCS eligible conferences. That's what I would do. But that's just my take on it. Tell me what you think. And speaking of conferences, it seems like the Pac-12, I just watched it this morning, could be on the verge of becoming the Pac-16. That would mean 4 more teams added to the stable. And who are the 4 teams that are being talked about? Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas, and Texas Tech. Now, why would Oklahoma State, Texas, and Texas Tech want to be a part of this? They're Southwest schools, right? Well, apparently it's because I guess they're seeing the benefits that Utah and Colorado are going to be reaping from it, and they want to be part of it. Because when you take a look at the overall conference standings right now, both of the new, as I call it, Big Ten, formerly the Big 12, the way I look at it, it's like this. You got 4 teams in the north and about 6 teams in the south. You should take one of the teams from the south, put them in the north. At least even it out. That's why a lot of people are looking at the Big 12 as not being the Big 10, the Big 10, formerly the Big 12, if you will, not as strong as it was before. Again, take one of the south teams, put them in the north. But here's the thing. We don't know if this is totally legit. We don't know if they're really going to go through with it or if they're just talking about it right now. But here's the question. What would that leave Kansas State, Missouri, Baylor, Texas A&M, where would it leave them? Where would it leave Iowa State? Where would it leave these teams? If Oklahoma State, Texas, and Texas Tech decide to leave and go to the Pac-12 and make it the Pac-16, where would it leave them? Well, I'll tell you where it would leave them. It would leave them with a few choices. Iowa, to me, this is what I look at. Iowa would definitely benefit from going to the Big Ten, because that's what Iowa State would benefit from going to the Big Ten, because that's where Iowa State is. I mean, Iowa State would benefit from going to the Big Ten, because that's where Iowa is. Kansas and Kansas State would benefit too. And thus, you would take the Big 11, as they call it, as I call it now, the Big 10, the Big 11, and turn it into the Big 14. Now, what would it leave Missouri, Baylor, and Texas A&M? Well, Baylor and Texas A&M, in my opinion, could join the SEC. Missouri, well, they could probably end up joining the Big 11, if you will, along with the other teams, or they could join the SEC as well. So this is the way I look at it. If Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Texas Tech go to the Pac-12, make it the Pac-16, it's only logical that the Big 10, or the now Big 11, takes Iowa State, Kansas State to join Nebraska as part of the new Big 14, and Missouri, Texas A&M, and Baylor should go and join the SEC. That's the way I look at it. That's how I figure it would work out and be fair to everybody. But that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. You know, Texas A&M might be the kind of school that would go independent, so that would leave Baylor and Missouri to go to the SEC. So, but again, that's just my take on it. Tell me what you guys think. Do you agree with everything I said here in this video about college football this year and the news that I just found out this morning? Tell me what you guys think. Comment down below, and I will talk to y'all later. You all have a good Sunday.